hello, fellow devoted and downtrodden, and welcome back to GSC 101 on 6. Tom, very lowest of men, your host here, and I'm going to be looking today at some advanced Genestealer cults tactics. Obviously, we've been making some guides on some of our favourite factions. I've had a look at units and detachments for GSC already, and one of the questions I got from people was we'd love to see some sort of examples of how you play this army and how you get the most out of it on the tabletop. I think GSC are one of the hardest armies in the game to play. Particularly when they're balanced anyway, right? They have moments of being wild, but when they've settled down, they are ultimately a fragile finesse army that take a lot of positioning and setup and careful macro thinking to get the most out of. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to be uncovering some of the sort of key tips and tricks that I have used to exploit this army competitively and that help you get the most out of it in games. And obviously, bits of advice and wonderful ideas that I've encountered out in the world from other fantastic GSC players like Innes Wilson, Danny Porter, Eric Lethuris as well. So there's a lot going on with this, and I'm not going to be able to unpack everything in complete depth today, but this should hopefully give you some ideas, some entry points for using the army in different ways. And if there's anything you'd like to see in future episodes, you can shout that out. I'd be more than happy to make it. Thanks so much for supporting us here at 6. Please do hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment on the video if you could. That all helps the YouTube Chaos Gods to channel us further into greatness. And if you want to sign up and support us as a YouTube member, help us make that wonderful content for you even more and even more regularly. Obviously, that's what we're trying to do this year. We're trying to really push the memberships. It would be amazing to have you involved. And if you're interested in some coaching, I do 40k coaching, and especially I can very much do GSC coaching via our YouTube membership chapter master program as well. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, come find me in our Discord. Links in the video below. I'll help you out there. All right, let's dive into the session. So as far as the structure goes, I've divided these kind of key tactics into both macro and micro. I think we'll look at the macro dimensions with GSC first. And I've broken this up into several chunks. So we're going to think today about anti-trading, we're going to think about space clearance, and we're going to think about focus switching. I think these are all elements that are really important to getting the most out of GSC, which is ultimately a layered wave attacking ambush army in its lore and in its theme, but also very much in its play as well. So you need to really push that advantage and start thinking like a guerrilla insurgent in order to get the most out of the army on the tabletop. Then I'm going to zoom into some micro dimensions. So there's a few things that ultimately help GSC to get by with their fragile, flimsy units. These include activation locking, icon-based antics, and a strategy known as the dirty fallback that's especially relevant for neophyte bricks in hosted ascension. So those are the things I'll be unpacking today. If there's other things you'd like to learn about or hear about, please do shout me out in the comments. I'd be more than happy to go in more depth or to explore other avenues as well. So let's talk macro and anti-trading first and foremost. I've talked about trading in other 6++ videos. If you're interested, go and check out our Trading 101 series. But I think one of the great powers of GSC in general is the ability to essentially trade for nothing, right? Because you have the access to the resurgent points, the ability to spend points to resurrect units, because you have a number of other ways to regrow units via icons, because you have the option to have units getting back up again when they die, like the Abominant. There are a whole bunch of different angles in GSC where you can force the opponent to be giving you their resources without you really losing yours. And that's key, I think, to getting the most out of the army. You want, for example, your opponent to be trading 90, 100 point units of Space Marines to clear out some Genestealers, which you are simply going to spend 2 resurgent points to resurrect anyway. You're essentially still got that 75 point unit. They have given you a 90 to 100 point unit. In an ideal world, you'll get the opponent in a situation where they are trading units out for your units without you actually really paying the same cost in resources. And you're trying to create that situation where towards the end of the game, the GSC army is much bigger because it's got all its returnees, its units have grown back, Abominants have stood back up, whatever version of this you're playing. And the opponent has traded away a lot of their resources and is eventually overwhelmed, right? So in the early stages of a game, I think you want to have a clear plan for how you're going to use smaller, cheap resources to draw the opponent out, get them to give you more expensive things, and then you'll have your resurgence plan baked in, right? So as mentioned, it might be, with the recent changes to resurgence points, it might be I'm going to throw a squad of Atalan Jackals out. They're going to do an action. The opponent's going to send a squad of a unit to come and kill them. I'm going to res that unit, bring it back in the exact same spot, ready to go again, and I'm going to kill what the opponent sent. And you're kind of creating these situations on the flanks where the opponent trades down repeatedly because you're not suffering casualties in quite the same way. At the same time, with something like a 20 Neo brick, if you can expose it, but have, for example, the icons and the characters hidden away, and your opponent can either then not quite kill enough of it so that it's going to grow back, or in the case of Host of Ascension, you're going to use Return to Shadows to pull that brick away. They once again have traded down, anti-traded. They've committed a tank, for example, to try and shoot this brick. They haven't actually killed it. You've pulled it up and away. You've still got your asset. You get to go again and hit them. And that is the power of opponents in Brood Surge in much the same way as well. Ultimately, with anti-trading, you are going to create situations where the opponent commits their army, commits their resources, opens themselves up to you doing damage in reply, and you are playing a very delicate game to avoid losing resources at the same rate, or to sort of fake out the opponent with, it feels like they've killed something, but actually you've simply resurrected it or sort of whisked it away to safety or whatever else. So I think there's a lot of value in seeing GSC as an anti-trading army and trying to create bad trades and anti-trades all over the board in your play. Another very important macro strategy for GSC is space clearance. Ultimately, you are an army that brings its resources back via deep strike, right? Or even works in fresh reinforcements via deep strike from the get-go, right? So to do that, you need space on the board. There are a number of different ways to gain space. You can block the opponent with pure strains and bikers in the early game to make sure they can't get mid-board, which then frees up your stuff to drop. But another really important macro strategy for GSC is to clear the chaff that the opponent is using to screen behind them. If you shell and clear off things like Zangor on the backfield, cultists, Poxwalkers, for example, for Death Guard, or if you deliberately target those units early on with things like Genestealers and your Ridge Runner Mortars and the Saboteur, these kinds of units, which are very good for stripping away chaff. Custodians is another great one. You target the Sisters of Silence immediately, kill all of those units off. That creates a situation for the opponent where they're going to really struggle to screen out your drop units as they come in Host of Ascension, for example, or Bio making charges, but they're also going to struggle to screen out the returnees once you start spending resurgence points, which is going to help you get behind and around the opponent, potentially threaten their back objective, and surround the enemy with damage and threat as well. So I think it's really important to see the game for GSC as a battle for space, one in which you have to actively engineer space on the board, and that means killing off chaff that's filling space, killing off units that are being used to screen early on. These are often scoring units too, right? So it's quite beneficial to you as an army that scores secondaries really well to target these units. But you have to be very deliberate about this, because if you're not, the situation can develop where the opponent simply floods mid-board, screens behind them, and you've no longer got anywhere relevant to drop. That's the fail case for GSC, right? If you don't actually get to drop in important areas of the board and impact the board in important ways, you're going to struggle. And so that is why it's absolutely imperative to see the early game as an exercise in space clearance. Strip away those screening units, strip away that space. I had a fantastic game against James Webster at one of the recent ITTs. He's playing Windrider Host. He goes first. He alphas me phenomenally aggressively. And ultimately, James wins that game because he plays it phenomenally well. But I will lose that game 20-0. No doubt at all, if I don't spend my first turn retaliating, killing all of his screening units. It's tempting to try and kill the Banshees and the Shining Spears and whatever else that's coming in front of you. But I killed the Rangers, I killed a couple of other units that he was using to screen, which he would have used to shut my returnees and my drop out of the board altogether. Because those were dead, I was then able to drop in and essentially table James's army, changing what was going to be a disastrous defeat in teams into a very close loss. Space clearance was crucial there. If I hadn't applied that basic principle, I lose hard, very, very hard. And all credit to James, he knew he needed to go for me straight away or I was going to body him. So yeah, space clearance, absolutely vital, and it's definitely how you get the most juice out of GSC drop turns in any of the detachments that you might be trying to play. My final macro tip for you is focus switching. Because you are an army that regenerates, because you are an army that can redeploy things, because you are an army that brings back units, you can use this to your advantage in macro terms by really pressuring one side early, getting the opponent to forcibly commit their army and their models to deal with you in that part of the board, and then as your models start relocating or returning, switching your focus to attack them on their other side. The UKTC Crucible map's a great example for this. I love to spend the first 2 turns attacking their expansion, get them to commit their army there, and as my units return or come in from deep strike, I switch to attack their home. And it's very difficult for an opponent to suddenly relocate and redeploy, right? So I think switching focus and angles of attack with GSC as your returnees come in is really useful. You're sort of probing for weak spots, trying to find new ways in, and you're taking advantage of the fact that you're deep striking in repeatedly, whereas your opponent is largely on the ground. So I think focus switching is a really, really useful thing to keep in mind. Probe one area. If you can deny primary in one place, get them to come and deal with it for a turn, that's great. Then if you can hit them somewhere else, you keep them constantly on the back foot, constantly on the move. And it has that net effect of forcing them back into their own third as they're trying to fight fires all the way across that front. And obviously in push play in current 10th, it's very hard for your opponent to score well on primary and secondary if they're just fighting back and forth across their own third of the board. So that's something I really recommend trying. Focus switching, change up that angle of attack, have a couple of turns, I'm going to push here, then another couple of turns I'm going to push over here, stretch the opponent, make them spend their resources and their time trying to get around, trying to fight fires in different places, and taking advantage of the fact that you essentially have the second wave of guys as your units start to die and resurrect as well. Those are my key macro tips as an entry point. I highly recommend trying all three in your games. So let's take it through into some of the micro if we're thinking about GSC sort of advanced tactics in terms of micro. One of the biggest ones is micro, in terms of micro, is activation locking and clogging, right? Ultimately, GSC are a bunch of 5-up save guys. So the question at times is, how on earth do I keep this alive in the face of enemy shooting and combat? And the answer ultimately is by shutting them down with numbers of bodies, by gumming them up, by using multiple units at once to bundle things if you need to create situations where although your opponent has better attacks, better guns, better melee, they don't have the volume to clear you in time. Obviously with GSC, because you have returnees, because you have icons, if your opponent doesn't confirm kills, especially on objectives, that's huge for you. So the key becomes to get multiple units with icons onto objectives, tagging different things, at which stage it becomes very difficult for your opponent to kill their way out, at which point the icons are going to regrow, at which point you're going to continue to flood the point with OC. Your opponent's then forced to either fall back, which obviously for a lot of armies means they're not going to activate into you at all, or they stay in which case they drown and you take the point. So I think clogging up enemy units is really useful. I think having a fix on how many attacks different types of enemy units have is absolutely crucial here, because you can create situations where you have 3 units of hand flamers with icons, a big brick of neophytes, a 10-man of neophytes. These are all things which need certain kinds of exact volume to kill. And if you push all of those things at once, your opponent suddenly starts to struggle to finish these things off, at which point the icons help you regrow models, at which point you can push your advantage and continue to press them with your good OC, your access to grenade, your decent shooting and melee as well. It is a case of, I think with GSC, it's better to either send a single thing, anticipating it dying, or send the army. If you used to go for a full overload, put lots of different units into an area, it becomes very difficult for the opponent to clear you consistently. That's where the mistakes come. That's where the undercommitments come. That's going to give you triggering off points for things like Return to Shadows if you're playing Host. And so activation locking is really, really useful here. If you do have to go into combat, my advice is having something like either Aberrants, a Truck, a Rock Grinder, some kind of tougher thing to tag up most of a combat unit and then hit their combat unit on the end with your more fragile melee pieces. That again locks their activations. It stops them using things like Fights First, for example. It stops them, even if they survive the assault, from actually being able to hit back your squishier stuff with enough models. And that's where basing up the opponent so they can't pile into your fragile units with many models. For example, you charge 10 neophytes into a Plague Marine brick on one end, then hit them with the full combat unit on the other. They fight first. They might kill 10 neophytes. Fine. Your combat unit then picks up the Plague Marines. The army has to work as a team. The units have to work as a team. Again, it's very much on theme, right? It's a bunch of plucky scamps working together to drown and bring down the heroes or villains of the Imperium and Chaos. And I think that's where understanding the outputs and understanding the sort of the scope you have to lock activations, lock down numbers of attacks, and clog the opponent is crucial. You have to be brave here. You have to push things in. You have to make a lot of different activations happen. But that's where opposing mistakes come from, and that's where you start to drown their ability to clear you and clear through your bodies. Because ultimately, GSC is something of a horde stat check at times, and you'll get more chances to make the most of that by using very careful and astute activation locking and clogging in your games. Taking it forwards, the icons, I think, is something that's worth locking in on even more. Obviously, we have the ability to regrow D3 models via an icon, and we have the ability to go D3 plus 3 neophytes if they're on an objective via an icon. There is so much mission play in this. It is absolutely pivotal to try and get neophyte units onto objectives as quickly as you can. Once on objectives, the opponent has to kill them completely or they grow back. 20-mans are incredibly obnoxious to clear. 10-mans are never worth anyone's effort to clear, and people really struggle in the heat of a very busy battle to find the resources to just clear a casual 10-man that stood on a point alongside other stuff if you're giving them a lot of different problems. But there are other more sort of finesse tricks you can do with icons as well, right? You have one option, for example, positioning with your heavy guns with a neophyte brick so they can see a target. Maybe they're on an objective as well. If the opponent shoots you back, they don't kill much. You pull those models away. You can regrow potentially onto an objective using the icon, or you simply take that unit up into the sky if you're playing Return to Shadows, or keep it down and then regrow those guns with the icon in the following turn. Those guns can stand still. They get the heavy weapon bonus. If neophytes are on an objective, you can potentially sticky it as well. And I think the other thing with icons that people don't appreciate, that actually took me a long time to appreciate, is that icons force your opponent to confirm kills, which is really useful for your Resurgence game plan. This is where the Acolytes with Hand Flamers or the Metamorphs are both fantastic, right? These are units which, if the opponent doesn't kill them, they grow back. They have Hand Flamers, they have decent combat. They're not a unit your opponent wants alive. The Echoes, especially with the OC2, cause havoc on the objectives if they're not dead. If you have an icon, your opponent has to kill them. So you want to leave the icon till last. Force your opponent to confirm the kill on the unit, which in turn means you can spend your Resurgence points to bring it back immediately. So you're creating a kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with icons. It's imperative that the opponent feels obliged to kill the unit fully, which in turn gives you the chance to immediately resurrect them. Or if they underkill it or undercommit, the icon's going to give you mission play and grow back OC in a valuable place on the board as well. Really, really effective. And again, this all ties into the activation locking. Pushing a whole bunch of units that need to be killed to the man all over the place, all at once, causes pandemonium for the opponent, and that's where a lot of your mission play and OC objective play comes from as well. And along those lines, I'm going to give you one little micro tip as well, which is one that I was very practicing in 9th. I've not practiced it as much as in 10th, but it is fantastic. And that is the dirty fall back. So with your neophyte bricks in particular, if you position the special weapons that you need close to the opponent at the front of this brick, then have something of a chain behind with the characters and any other longer range guns towards the back, with a fan out in front with the special weapons. If the opponent charges the front of that unit and kills to try and tag it and kills some models, you can pull from this chain from the middle, which breaks the coherency of the unit, which means that the models they're stuck in combat with, they can't pile in any further. They're stuck in combat with the front ranks there, which you then pull away because you have to pull away to make coherency because your coherency has been broken, which leaves the icon, your character, and a couple of other special weapons at the back. More special weapons grow back from the icon, and then that unit is still free to shoot. You don't have fallback and shoot in GSC. This is your best way of getting it, right? Having layered ranks, chains of single models in the middle. If the opponent commits certain numbers of kills, you can pull those units in the middle, break coherency, regrow, and continue shooting anyway. It's extremely sneaky when you can pull it off. You always want to be looking for opportunities to set it up. I know for a fact positioning neo bricks is always one of those things where it's very easy to be a bit sloppy and a bit lazy. Taking a couple of minutes to make sure a neophyte unit is set up in such a way that any countercharge in it is going to be vulnerable to a dirty fallback is really, really useful and helps you to keep shooting, keep moving, keep causing trouble for the opponent further into the game. Okay, guys, well, that's it for this Advanced Tactics episode. Thank you very much for watching. If there's other specifics you'd like to see me cover, I'd be really happy to make more GSC content for you. Obviously, they're one of my favourite armies in the game. Really enjoy making this stuff, so do let me know in the comments what you would like to see. Thank you so much for supporting 6++. We're massive fans of all of you. If you could hit like, subscribe, leave us a comment, we'd love that. And once again, just to reiterate, if you want to support us financially as a YouTube member, we'd absolutely love to have you involved too. Come and get involved in our Discord. We've got a huge growing community in there, lots of conversations around factions going, lots of TTS leagues, painting competitions, all sorts of fun things going on. It'd be awesome to have you. So that's it for me this time. I'll see you again soon. Lowest of Men out. Bye-bye.